Hello, and welcome to the Cycle Endometriosis podcast, where we will delve deep into experiences, challenges, and triumphs of those navigating a life with endometriosis. Join us as we share the stories of resilience, offer insights from experts, and foster a community of support for those affected by this often misunderstood condition. Whether you're newly diagnosed, a seasoned warrior, or seeking understanding, I hope this podcast is here to help empower you and uplift you on your journey. Tune in as we break the silence, shatter stigmas, and amplify the voices of the endometriosis community. Medical disclaimer: this podcast is not intended for the purpose of providing medical advice. All information, content, and material of this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. Thank you so much for being here, and now on to the show. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well today and feeling well. On today's show, we have Rachele joining us from Austin, Texas. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing well too. It's a sunny day here in Detroit, Michigan, and that always makes us very happy when we get to see the sun. So I'm in a great mood, and we're recording this on a Friday, which is also very lovely. So
exactly,
yeah.
Ready for the weekend for sure.
For sure. And you have a big weekend coming up. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, for sure. So I currently live in Austin. This weekend, I'm actually getting married. So getting married tomorrow. Yes. And I've been with my significant other now for about 10 years. So not a big surprise that we're getting married, but we're excited to do it. And yeah, so got that going on. But I'm from Austin. I work in commercial real estate in Austin. I've been in real estate for about 6 years, in commercial for about a year and a half, going on 2 years. And yeah, about me, I also, I have my boyfriend, Clark, and our dog, Chewy. That's kind of our unit at home. And they've been a really great support system for me throughout all my endo journey. So they've been need to give them a quick shout out for that too.
Well, I love the name Chewy. That's super cute. And congratulations. Huge day for you tomorrow. So really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us today about, your endo journey. And I always like to start at the beginning of, when did you first realize something was off, or you had interesting symptoms, maybe, or maybe no symptoms at all, that you started to just realize something was off?
Sure. So I always, like growing up and everything, always had a really regular period, a really regular cycle. I was an athlete growing up. I played sports in college, and everything was always pretty regular. I think it wasn't until I graduated college where I started to have issues. So early in my 20s, specifically when I can remember things becoming an issue was in 2019. I had really bad pain in my lower right abdomen. Kind of felt like I didn't know what appendicitis felt like, but that's what everyone was saying was, could be appendicitis. It's on that side of the body. And went to a primary care physician. They didn't really have any, they couldn't find anything that was suspicious. And then I, at my OBGYN in Austin, I had asked her about it, and I was just like, I'm having this pain. And she did an ultrasound, ended up I had a cyst, which I've never had cysts, at least never knew I had them. At least I know we all can have them normally from time to time, but not one that physically altered my state, I guess. And so had a cyst, and she said, we'll watch it, see if it gets bigger. If not, if it gets smaller, then we don't have to worry about it. But otherwise, we may have to operate it, remove it. Oddly enough, that one ended up going away, but I just kept getting them more frequently, which was a little uncommon for me. And so, and then my pain just started to become even more unbearable going into 2020. I had a couple cysts. I had been tested for UTIs. I had negative results for that. I've tried all kinds of birth controls. And one thing I haven't tried is an IUD, but tried all different kinds of birth controls with that same OBG. And from there, my pain just continued to still get worse. So in the latter half of 2022, of 2020, I just sort of decided that this wasn't normal and I really needed to seriously take it to somebody who would take me a little bit more seriously. And so saw a different OBGYN just to see if there was a different perspective that I could find. And she did the same tests, ultrasounds and whatnot, but she noticed, I guess, some sensitivity in the ultrasound and said, you could have endometriosis. We don't know for sure. We've tried all the things for you already that kind of rule out everything else. And she said the only way to know would be to operate. And so she wanted to try some other things before getting to that stage. So I went on Orlissa, which is a medication or, preventative medication for endometriosis. And so I took that for about 6 months or so and wasn't really noticing a difference. I was still having a lot of pain. I was really fatigued. I was having some frequency of urination, which was not normal for me. And so she finally kind of said what kind of instigated getting a procedure the first time was I ended up going to the emergency room for my pain. And I had felt like, I was like, maybe it is my appendix. Is this thing about to burst? It was that bad. I couldn't even drive. And so my boyfriend had taken me to the emergency room and, they gave me all the pain medication to help with that. They ended up doing a CT scan and they said, you actually have another cyst. That's what it is. Ruled out the appendicitis. And I was just kind of overhearing like, all right, you got another cyst and it could be endometriosis. And so
when they said, I'm sorry to
interrupt
you, but when they said endometriosis, had you heard of it? Did you know what it was? Did you go home and Google it?
I had no idea what it was. I truly didn't. And I hadn't even really seen it in passing or have never had friends talk about it. And so I did look at kind of what it was, but I felt even at that point in 2019, 2020, there wasn't a lot of information on it. And to, a little bit ignorant on my side, I didn't really probably do as much research as I should have. I was just kind of trusting the professionals I was seeing.
Sure.
So they did do a lot of explanations. I think seeing the different specialists I've seen throughout time and seeing how differently they all described it was really interesting to me too. Up until my most recent surgery with my with my surgeon now. And he's the one who explained it the best and really knew in my first appointment, like, how bad it got and where it probably is and all of that.
Sure. Well, I got us a little off track. Yeah. So they said it, you didn't know, you go to the ER and you're having this pain and they're saying another cyst. And at this point now you're frustrated. Going back to Orlissa, because I know, some people don't want to take that because they haven't seen great success with it. I know some people who said they did feel better on it. It didn't sound like it helped you. Did you have any side effects or anything for people who might be considering taking that? Anything that how it affected you?
I don't think anything outside of emotionally. I felt a little bit like I wasn't in control of my emotions. I think throughout the entire endo journey, I felt that, but specifically on Orlissa and a lot of the other hormone treatments with birth control. And I'm a pretty laid back, go with the flow person, pretty innately happy. And so when I started to notice those drastic up and down moods, not being able to regulate my nervous system, that was when I was just like, it's hard to show up at work. It's hard to show up in friendships, relationships, all the above. So I think it was really more the emotional side effects, not for me, anything physical that I noticed.
Right. But I appreciate you mentioning that because I had very similar reactions to birth control too. And that disrupts your whole life, especially like you said, like I didn't feel like I was behind the wheel. Like I was just like, I felt like a very grounded person and I couldn't feel grounded. I was just feeling like a little out of control of my own emotions. So I'm glad that you mentioned that,
Yeah.
because that's, I mean, it might not be a physical side effect, but that greatly impacts your life, like you said, you know?
Yes.
So it's okay. So after the ER, what happened?
So I went to after the ER, my OB, the second OB that I had been seeing, had said, okay, we need to get in there and see what's going on. She said it's probably endo, we don't know, but let's operate and just do discovery, laparoscopic procedure. And when she did the procedure, she performed ablation. It turned out that I did have endometriosis. It was actually pretty minimal in my first procedure from what she had told me, although she did not do a full scope of my entire pelvic floor and like
Mhm.
all my organs within it. She had only really concentrated on the right side where my pain was. And so she performed ablation, showed me kind of where the endometrius was within my pelvic floor. It was mostly on my ovaries and on my pelvic walls and kind of on the back as well. And so she had showed me that. I had a little bit of relief of pain I still was sore. I think after surgery, the biggest thing is that it's hard to distinguish, like, okay, am I sore from surgery or am I still having pain? Is it
Right.
ghost pains? Like, kind of what's going on. And um after 6 months, that same pain started coming back on the right side again. And on top of that, my periods were just becoming like excruciating.
Mhm.
And I think at that time in my life, I was in a really, really demanding job. And I was working probably 14 to 16 hours a day and managing a lot of clients and whatnot. And I attributed a lot of my symptoms to stress or not really taking care of myself because of that job and whatnot. And I also was just like, I don't have time to deal with this right now, because
Yeah.
how do you live your life while also trying to figure out what to do next or who to go to and who to trust? And so I think my mistake was putting it on the back burner for a little bit. I'm not sure if you can relate to that, but yeah.
Definitely not a mistake, though. I don't think it's a mistake, because when when there's the lack of awareness, it's hard for you to make it a priority, because everyone you're seeing is just kind of like, oh, it's this thing. They're not treating it as severe as they should. So
Yes.
that's kind of how I also reacted to it. Like, I didn't started treating it to be very severe until it was like every single day I felt sick. I
Yes.
worked a demanding job too. I think you were probably in your younger 20s. I was in my younger 20s too, and I was just like trying to keep up with my friends, trying to keep up at work, and didn't understand why I couldn't. I thought it was
Yes.
just, I thought it was me. Like, I thought, oh, it's just, you need to work harder, or what, all of
Hmm.
that. But I also think, at least for me personally, there was like an emotional part that didn't want to admit there was something wrong. So I just kept
Yes.
pushing and pushing and pushing until it wouldn't let me push anymore. And I had to have intervention. I mean, that's
Yeah.
basically what happened. Yeah,
Exactly.
where I was like,
Exactly.
okay, I'm 24, I'm 25. I can't barely go out at night. My friends are all going out and like having fun and doing all the stuff, and I'm
Yes.
laying in bed. Like, something,
Hmm.
that's when I was finally like, something's wrong. And I felt awful. So,
All the
yeah.
time. Yeah. The
Yeah.
fatigue is real. And like you don't know
Yes.
when it's gonna hit, but then it can become so constant, like you said, to where it's like you start canceling on plans, and then that kind of
Mhm.
spirals into, okay, now I'm freaking out about how I'm showing up for the people in my life, and
Mhm.
you feel depressed and all those things. And it's really hard because, like you said, also, like, not a lot of people know about it. And
Mhm.
so to explain it to somebody is difficult. And me not really understanding endo to the extent that I do now, I didn't really know that it could affect me in the ways that it had.
Right.
So
Right. Well,
it's interesting.
reflecting back to now that you know and what you do know, I always like to ask people were there other symptoms maybe that you didn't think were correlated? Because I know for sure that was I always thought I had stomach issues, but really it was all correlated with the endometriosis. When I reflected back, I was like, wow, this is
Yeah.
all related.
There's
Headaches, migraines. Oh my gosh.
Yes, nausea, like low
Yep.
appetite,
Mhm.
bloating was really bad. I had really bad back pain, which I'm tall and was an athlete, and I kind of dealt with back issues in a lot of regards. But I also focus a lot on wellness and taking care of myself, mobility, strength training. And so I was just like, it can't be
Right.
that necessarily. And then the urinary urgency was also something I didn't know related to it. I was going to the bathroom probably 3 to 5 times a night,
Oh my
which
goodness.
then just
Yes.
affects your, okay, I'm exhausted
You're
all day.
right.
And you're like, all right, I'm
Right.
already exhausted. Then you add that into it.
Right.
And it's just,
Right.
it's
And you're
crazy
like, and I'm
that,
in my 20s. This is supposed to be my prime,
yeah,
right? That's when you're supposed to be having the most fun and doing all the things. And yeah,
yes,
it's very hard.
exactly.
Okay.
And
So after that ablation, you said it was 6 months. And things were starting to get worse.
things are
What
starting to get
happened?
bad again. I put it on the back burner. I was just like, you don't got time right now to think about this. So we're going to try to see. I saw one other OBGYN in Austin, and he had told me a little bit more about endo, actually, which I had appreciated. But his solution was to he gave me 3 options. Basically, he said you can get pregnant, that'll help.
That's
Or,
a myth.
yeah, exactly.
It's
You
a
can
myth,
get pregnant,
everyone. Oh my
go through
gosh.
menopause, or get an IUD. And I know the IUD has been successful for some people, but I
Sure.
think what worried me about his opinion on it was he had kind of tried to sell me on it in the way that he had put the most IUDs or installed the most IUDs than anyone else in Austin. And that to me was just okay,
No.
so this is just your one
Right. This
solve for
feels like a
all.
business pitch too. He's
Yeah.
pitching you
Yes.
I'm sure your intuition was like run for the hills.
Literally, I was like, that does not sound right. I feel like there's more than just this one solution. So I never saw him again. I had saw him the one time and never saw him again. Then I really got discouraged after that. And
Yeah.
I have a friend who has IC, which is interstitial cystitis,
Mhm.
which is a bladder like disease, I guess you could call it as well, or
I
not sure.
know it's a lot of people who have endo also have IC. I don't know what it's characterized as, honestly.
And I was diagnosed with mild IC the second surgery, which I'll get into that later, but I didn't even know I had it at the time. But she has IC, so she has some issues with like frequency and her pelvic floor as well. And she has a lot of routine surgeries with this urologist in Austin. And she said she's really wonderful. Maybe just go see her and see if anything, she can give you guidance on um, your pelvic floor, or maybe give you ideas of how to help with the pain or connect you with someone who might be able to help. And so I saw her, and she was also amazing. She couldn't help me in regards to endo as much, but she said she was the first doctor who had told me when she was kind of looking into things for me. She had told me that I had a really tight pelvic floor, and that she could tell, especially on my right side, was much tighter than my left. And
Mhm.
so she told me you should probably look into pelvic floor therapy. That'll help relax everything, will probably help with the urinary frequency, because everything is just like
Right.
really tight and contracting probably consistently, and that's what's causing that. And so then I started going to physical therapy for that. I saw physical therapy at the physical therapist at Origin, and she said the same thing. You're really, really tight. We did that for about 4 months, and it helped alleviate a little bit of the pain. But at the same time, I like still was having like excruciating periods and like wasn't able to go to work for periods of time because I couldn't, the fatigue was hard for me to get up. The pain was hard. Like you said, would get headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just feel really sad, which sounds, dramatic maybe, but
No, it's not. It's honest. It's really honest.
yeah. And it was just, I felt so depressed by it. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, okay, I'm doing all these things, right? Like I'm seeing the OB, I'm seeing primary, I'm trying different opinions, I'm going to a urologist, which I've never seen before. And I don't want to be reliant on pain medications or anything like that. I prefer holistic approaches to healing. And so for me, I don't really enjoy taking pills or anything like that. And that was a lot of the solutions that were given to me. And so I'd gone to the ER again because of my pain. And because I didn't know what to do and I just felt so helpless. And after that ER visit, I finally was just like, all right, I need to just find somebody who knows like what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah.
And I researched, just honestly, I Googled the best endometriosis specialists in the US. I was like, I'm going straight to the top. Like, I'm not messing around anymore.
I need a solution. But let's pause there really quick because I want to go back to, I don't think you were being dramatic about being sad. I think so many people that are listening are going to feel that same way. And I felt that way too, because it's like, you're losing a part of you're a part of yourself, no matter what age it is. You don't feel in control. And that is really, really challenging.
Yes.
Really challenging. And I think that we need to pause and recognize that, because also when you don't have like a plan or like a care team that gets it, which is very, very common because this disease has such a lack of awareness, then it's like you also don't have a plan. Like, so I think you were justified, obviously, in the way that you felt, because it's very challenging, especially in the very beginning when you're just starting to like learn all of these things, but then there feels like there's not someone there to help you.
Yes. And I think too, on top of like the sadness, the depressive feelings, I think one thing I didn't attribute to endo was the anxiety. And what really, not why I went to the ER, but on top of the pain, it was like my whole body was just tense and couldn't relax. It was hard for me to breathe deeply. And I like was having shoulder pains and all of that. And I just was like, I can't even relax. And this might sound like TMI, but the only time my body could relax was if I had an orgasm.
Yeah.
And was like in that brief moment, it was like, okay, I can relax for like a second.
But how can your body relax when you're in this probably much higher pain than you even realized, because you just get used to it, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
It's your whole body is like inflamed and reacting. And I know, like, I don't know clinically, and nobody, I don't think, really knows, because we don't know enough about endo, but like clinically, like anxiety and depression are related to endo. And I, for sure, in my like very young, like 1920s, I struggled with anxiety so bad, but I didn't know what it was. I thought I was just like, again, I thought there was something majorly wrong with me. And I was just so like anxious all the time about everything. And until I started to like take control of the disease and learn ways to like calm my body, it was very hard for me too, especially because I was like, I remember, I think I was like 19 or 20. And I was
I
like,
shouldn't even know what to do with your emotions.
I had no idea. I didn't even know what the word anxiety meant or was, right? And so once I figured out, okay, like I know what this is, it did help. But yeah, it's hard. It's very, very, very challenging. So you got to your point where you're like, okay, I'm Googling who's the best and what happened.
Going to the top. Yeah. I was so fed up. And I don't know enough about healthcare in Texas, but I know that women's healthcare is just like really behind. And what I've learned through this is like California, New York are probably the furthest ahead when it comes to women's health. And so, unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of success in Texas or in Austin. So I had done some research and I had found my most recent surgeon that I had surgery with last year, Dr. Kamran Najat. And he's based in San Jose up in California. Why I picked him or why I decided to work with them was when I called to schedule the appointment, I felt like they had asked me more questions than anybody else prior to even visiting that were related to endo and my symptoms and my not only my physical symptoms, my emotional symptoms. And that just gave me some more reassurance of, okay, these guys know what they're talking about, what this could mean for me. Because I'm not well off enough to just jet up to California and do all the things to get this all done.
Right.
But I felt desperate enough to where it was like, okay, I need to seriously look at this. And this is the only person who's listening to me, or at least his team. And they got me in for an appointment within, I think it was a week and a half or so.
Wow.
And so I went up there, did an appointment so I explained my situation. I have my whole story typed out because I usually will just send it now before I see somebody because I'm like, we reiterated so much.
Yes.
And explained everything, explained my symptoms. Even just by explaining my symptoms to him, he knew what was going on. He had performed an ultrasound, and I don't have the name of it with me right now, but I have it in my transcript from my appointment. He performed a certain ultrasound that he could tell that the tissue lining in my endometrium was thicker in a certain area. And so he had known, he was like, that's a pure sign of endometriosis. And I was like kind of taken aback because I've had so many ultrasounds. I can't even tell you how many ultrasounds I've had. Where they're just like, there's nothing there, or it's a cyst, or that's really it. And so at that appointment, he had transcribed the whole appointment too. So after I had left, I knew exactly what we talked about.
That's so nice.
Which
that
is like,
so nice.
Oh
wow.
my gosh. It was amazing.
Yes. Because in the moment, I kind of black out a little bit in the moment.
Yeah.
Like I just like don't remember everything, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like what were they saying? What did I say? Like all the things.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. So they sent me that the same day that I left from that office. They also scheduled me for surgery because he knew, he was like, you're going to need to have surgery. We're going to do an excision surgery, which I didn't know there was a difference. But now I know that that's the gold standard for endometriosis. And so within another week from that, I had surgery with him, which also wild how quickly he could get me in, considering all of the patients he's seeing. The efficiency at his operation I've never seen in healthcare. I was really, really impressed. And I had surgery with them. They had sent me more pre-surgery and post-surgery information than I've ever received. And I think what I didn't know going into this procedure was how much more of a recovery it is for excision surgery versus ablation. And I didn't understand that, which again, I need to do a little bit more research for myself prior, but I was just kind of like, I just need to get this done, and I trusted him. So, after that surgery, I probably taken me, to give you context, the first surgery, I felt like I was back at work within a couple weeks, maybe. I was still a little sore, but could be like walking around doing all the things. This surgery, it was like I was down for the count for like a month and a half. Not, progressing in that time, but I really, it really was hard to walk even that first day because of how much there was that he had found. And so crazy. He also transcribed the entire procedure. So I knew exactly what they did, when they did it, how they did it. So now I have that to take with me wherever I go, like pages and pages and pages of transcription. And so I recommend him to everybody for
Well,
endometriosis.
that's incredible. I mean, that just to have the transcription like that is so helpful to then you like I have a normal OBGYN here in Michigan, right? And I just give all the information, but to like have that so they really understand how severe the disease is, right? And
Yes.
I'm glad that you mentioned ablation and excision. I think anyone who's considering surgery, you have to do your research on this. And excision is gold standard where the disease is actually cut out versus ablation where it's burned. Again, I'm not a medical expert, but definitely do your research on that. And yes, excision surgery recovery, because they're doing so much like cutting the disease out. It's a pretty intense procedure.
Yes, yeah. It sounds minimal because it's laparoscopic, so it's like, oh, it's not going to be. But I think because of where they found it, which for me, they had found it throughout my pelvic floor this time around. He had scoped everything, and mostly on my back nerves, pelvic walls, ovaries, my bladder, and so which made sense because of the urinary frequency and whatnot. And then I also had found out as a result, I had mild interstitial cystitis. And that had to do with the frequency. So he enlarged my bladder while he was in there as well to help with that. But yeah, it was when he had told me everywhere he had found it, my jaw like hit the floor.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Because I was like, you're told it's not a big deal, or it'll go away potentially, or birth control will help. And I was so scared going into surgery, and I think a lot of people will relate to this. I was so scared to go into surgery and them not find anything.
Yeah.
Because you almost feel like you're making it up in your head.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I have a really high pain tolerance. And so when my significant other will say this, like when I'm in pain, like it usually means I'm in really bad pain.
Yeah.
And so if I was like, well, God forbid I go in here and they don't find anything, what does that say? Or maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. And maybe I'm being dramatic and whatnot. So I think that's a really relatable feeling. And
100%. And that comes from, I think, society and like the societal lack of information. The other doctors you saw that I felt like the doctors would just like pat me on the back and tell me just take birth control and I'll be fine. And it's such an overused word, but it really is the gaslighting. You start to second guess yourself, even though like in your intuition, something's wrong. It happened to me too. There were multiple times I was like, I hope who hopes to go into surgery and they find things wrong with you. Like I was hoping, because I was like, I can't live like this. And all these other doctors are telling me I'll take birth control and I'll be fine. And there is no cure for this disease. And they, some of these doctors, and I don't want to fault them all, they're not educated, but they should work to get more educated on it. Yeah. Just like, they just dismiss you and they think you're being overreactive, which is not true. I'd like to see them deal with this pain for one day.
Yes, that's the other thing. Yeah, it's really, like I said, got high pain tolerance, and it's like when I can't go to work or I can't go out or I don't want to go out or I'm scared to make plans because I don't know how I'm going to feel. And I've had friends, unfortunately get frustrated with me and like, rightfully so. They're not fully understanding of the situation, but that causes a whole other can of worms of, okay, then you with worthiness of yourself and, is it me? Am I showing up how I should? And it really can then spiral, I think, into a lot of other issues that, I didn't consider getting and learning more about this. And thankfully I have a really good support system for it. But, there was definitely, periods of time where people would get frustrated or be like, oh, Rachel, doesn't want to show up to this, or Rachel's not showing up again. And it's like, because I don't know. And so then I just stopped trying to make plans, or would try to tell people, I don't know how I'm going to feel. So
I mean, one of my best friends was like, "You're sick all the time." And that really hurt my feelings because I would cancel last minute. And I get it. I don't want people to cancel on me last minute, but they don't understand what it's like to go through this type of illness. And you could feel fine at noon, and then at 4 p.m. you could be down for the count on the couch and you can't function. And so maybe they saw you posting something fun on Instagram, and then that night you can't go out. And it's hard for them to understand. Having this disease has actually really changed me. It made me so much more empathetic to everyone and what they're going through. And as someone who's like led teams, there would be times where people would call in sick and I would like roll my eyes and be like, oh, they're probably out going. And now I just take, you know what? I take everything at face value. Someone tells me they have a migraine. I'm like, go home right now, put on glasses, go. Even if maybe sometimes people are making it up and they're going to do something fun, it's changed how I view people and what they say. Like I really just, I take everyone at their word because people weren't taking me at my word. I have a really good support system too, thank goodness. But it's hard when you haven't gone through it, and people just need to be more empathetic. And if they're good friends, like I'm like, watch, you know, the documentaries about this disease, and it's changed some of them. Some of them have apologized to me for how things that they've said because they didn't understand it from me, but hearing it, like even sharing this podcast, not that I'm trying to promote sharing it, but sometimes having someone hear it from a different person, they learn and they're like, wow, Rachel really is going through a lot. I need to be more empathetic, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate to this to degrees. I don't always, or I'm getting better at it, but I have a tough time telling people when I'm struggling. And so add this, you know, endo into people don't understand it. I'm already kind of anxious about sharing when I'm struggling. And it's like, I felt very lonely. And I felt when I did share it, depending who I shared it to, I didn't know what response I was looking for, but a lot of times it wasn't anything that made me feel better. And that's not to anybody's fault necessarily, but it was just my experience. And so I think that was really a struggle was, okay, I have to really be vulnerable and share where I'm really coming from right now, which has always been really difficult for me because I'm always just like, I'm good, I'm fine, I can handle this. This is not a big deal, you know, rub some dirt on it. And so yeah, so I think that was a little bit difficult. And one thing I forgot to mention was they also found it on my bowels, which didn't know that could be possible, but that had had explained a lot of issues with my digestion, which I think you spoke about a little bit earlier. And so like I have really frequent, I don't know how to say it politely, but
you don't have to be polite here.
okay, like I frequently would use the go number 2.
Okay.
And or consistently. And so like, but by the time my endo got really bad the second time, I was going number 2 like several times a day. Like throughout, anytime I ate, I was like going to the bathroom.
Immediately,
yeah. And so I was like, this is weird. I was getting flu-like symptoms too, which is something I didn't know was related to endo, but I was getting sick all the time with the flu, I felt like. And yeah, so that was also something interesting I forgot to say earlier. But yeah, it was, I think I took a month for working from home because I just like couldn't get off the couch, or I didn't know what my body was going to do that day. And you just feel like not worthless, but a little bit to a degree. Because you're like,
you were healing. You were healing.
Yeah.
It's really hard because it's internal. Imagine if somebody had done, like, you broke your arm and someone had done surgery on your arm and you had like the scars and the bleeding and everything to see it. It's easier to then like actually visibly see it and be like, oh, I need to rest this. But when it's internal, I think it's very hard to know, like, no, I just went through this major surgery. My body is craving rest. It's good that you worked from home that long. You probably needed to work from home for 2 months.
Yeah, it's true. Because your body's catching up. And I think to that point of it not being externally visible issue is like people forget about it pretty easily.
Yes.
Even when you tell them about it, it's like it's a very easy thing to forget. And so I ran into that a lot, and I would get a little bit bummed, because you're like, this is something that I'm really struggling with, and it seems like nobody, and I think illness in general, unfortunately, can be that way where people are really hyper aware of it for a moment, but it's easy to kind of regress into your routine and in your life and forget about it. And so to that note, I think it can feel so lonely.
Yeah.
And what I've learned through this process and what I didn't do the first time I had my procedure was I didn't really share that it happened or what had happened. And I was a little bit ashamed of it, I would say. Like, my body let me down. It's like, I've never really had big health issues. So I was like, I'm very much ashamed. I didn't really talk about it. And then versus the second surgery I had last year, I've been a lot more vocal about it. And now I feel like I have this little community of endo warriors that all can kind of share. And I wish I had that early on in my journey of other people who understand it, because you don't realize how many women really deal with this.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it until I started talking about it. And I even, people I went to high school with, college with, someone found me based on my Google review on Yelp to my doctor.
Yeah.
And so I think now knowing it doesn't have to be that lonely, and I can connect with people who get it when I'm around people who might not. And so it's hard to get it unless you're going through it. So I think it is also a little bit beautiful that we all can support and connect in that way, even though it's over something that's rough to go through. Yeah.
We have a different bond, and I appreciate how well you just articulated so many things about it being lonely, but finding that community, which is super important. There's a ton of groups, Facebook groups, Instagram groups. Like you said, someone found you on your Google review, and there is like an instant bond. You can just have a conversation with someone who gets it. But I also really appreciate that you're being more vulnerable, which is hard, and talking to people who don't have it, or in your community or in your family or friends or whatever, it's really hard. But there's almost a part of it that's like healing too, when you're like, no, I actually had this major surgery and I need you to listen to understand what I'm going through right now. And it's very, very challenging. And it's still kind of like taboo because it's dealing with certain organs, and it shouldn't be taboo. I use this example all the time. I'm sure people on the podcast are so sick of me saying it, but I had a coworker, or like someone who was a vendor, came into town and he was like, Melissa, I have diabetes, so I need to just like stay on this schedule of eating or whatever, because we were going to have a really busy day. And I was like, okay. But I knew, like, I instantly understood, because I have the awareness of that condition, where when people don't have the awareness of our condition, and I do think it's a lot better than it has been, but still, 2023, you said your surgery was last year, and you were still dealing with, unfortunately, medical professionals who didn't really understand.
Yeah.
And so if they don't understand, how can we expect the public to understand what this is and what we're going through? So, with that coworker who came in and I knew, like, I was checking on him, making sure that he was okay, making sure we were in his right intervals. But with us, it's almost like, oh, you're making it up, because people don't have the understanding of how hard and challenging this disease is.
Yes, like full body. And that's what I learned after my second surgery was it's a full body inflammatory disease. It's not just a reproductive disease.
Correct.
And so learning that, and now I've taken steps to, I've adjusted my diet, so I'm not consuming anything really inflammatory, whether that's gluten, dairy, processed food, sugar. I try to avoid those things, alcohol. I'm not a big drinker anyways, but I'm a little more conscious of it though, because I can tell, and it isn't curable. So it is a situation where, my doctor, the second surgery said, it could come back. We're going to prevent as much as we can, and we're going to check in on you every year. But it is, the reality of it is it can come back, and it could be something I deal with again. So I'm trying to take some steps, even if they're minor food changes, or I'm not as, I work out frequently, and I used to be like, I got to go hard 5 days a week. And that's it. And now it's like, okay, now I'll do some Pilates or yoga on days where I'm maybe in certain phases of my cycle. Cycle syncing, I've been trying to get really involved with so that I can be a little bit more attuned to what movements are better for my body during those certain phases, which has been helpful. So I think my outlook on just wellness and fitness has also evolved through this journey, which is good regardless of having this or not. But yeah, so I think taking some of those little steps to just mitigate anything in the future has been helpful too.
How are you feeling like present day?
I feel the best I've felt since like 2019. Like post surgery, I told everybody post surgery, I was like, I feel like my body can relax again. My anxiety is gone. I mean, we all have anxiety. It's not fully gone, but
the level of like, it's
yes,
consistently up here,
like
is
every
gone.
day throughout the day, couldn't relax and always overthinking and whatnot. And the depressive symptoms, physically, I feel the best I've felt in a long time.
Good.
I can work out again. I think leading up to surgery, I didn't work out for about 5 months, which for me, if you know me, is not like me.
Yeah.
And so that was also really hard. And so now I'm like, I can do all the things I love again. I have energy. My boyfriend or fiance, he will say, like after my surgery, he's like, you're cooking again, you're getting up and wanting to go do dinner, go out for dinner, go for drinks or do whatever. And I'm like, he's like, it's just so nice to see you. Like, he's not to put me down and how I was feeling before, but he's like, it's just like, I'm so happy that you are feeling more like you again. Yeah. And you can do all these things again that you like, not me, even my friends are like, you're suggesting going to do this now? Like what? And so having the energy, the mindset and the emotional, I think, strength to just show up how I used to has been the biggest difference I've noticed. And I don't have my pain. I had pain post surgery. I will say they told me though, I was going to have pain during my cycles for about 6 months post surgery because of everything still healing.
Yes.
So it was that way for about 6-7 months. I'll be a year post surgery next month. And I am just like, no pain. I have a normal cycle, and consistent. And yeah, so I'm really glad I did it. I'm glad I advocated for myself. That's my biggest advice to everyone. And I know it's hard to do when you feel like no one's listening or you're going to all the different people, but there will be somebody who does. And find the people that specifically specialize in endometriosis, which goes without saying, I think, but I think I didn't even really register that there was people out there that would. And yeah, so I think being an advocate for yourself is something I learned to do, and it was hard to do, but I think it's something everybody with this disease needs to do for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said. Couldn't have said it better. And yeah, it's just the access to care is really hard too. Like trying to find someone, the fact that some people have to travel out of state to find someone, it's really challenging. And some of these people don't take insurance, but there is hope. There are some episodes back. If anyone wants to listen, I know some people who gone to hospitals that were nonprofits and applied for like grants. And so there is hope. There are ways to find help. And it's hard. Like you said, Rachele, like you get exhausted with like all the appointments and the ultrasounds, and it's a lot to keep going and advocating for yourself. But knowing that you can feel like you feel right now makes it all worth it in the end.
Yes, 100%. I am really glad I took the steps I did. I know mine was a little bit more desperate, went up to California to do it, but it was, I will go back to him. If you're in California and you have this, Dr. Kamran Najat is what's the best experience I've ever had with a professional in healthcare. And between him and his team and what they did to take care of me before, during, and after, was just an amazing experience. And hopefully I don't have to deal with it again anytime soon, but I know that's a possibility. So, but I'm glad I have people now to speak to about it and that can relate to it as well.
Good. Well, anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think just knowing, to anyone who is listening, that you're not alone and that your symptoms are very valid and your feelings are very valid, and that you deserve to feel your best. So remind yourself that when you're feeling all the things. So everyone deserves to feel authentically themselves. So
yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing with us and being vulnerable and honest and talking about all the things. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening and being here. This show means so much to me, and I hope that it's helped you or helped someone today. And I hope everyone is feeling okay. Thank you so much for tuning in.